Okay, let's dive in. Think about a country whose very shape tells a story. Vietnam, right?
Mhm.
That incredible ribbon stretching over 1,600 kilometers. It's not just an outline on a map.
Not at all. It's fundamental.
Picture it. You've got the rugged, mountainous north, home to the Annamite Range, and Phanapan, that's Indochina's highest peak, by the way.
Over 3 to 100 meters, yeah.
Then you drop down to the fertile plains of the Red River Delta, where Hanoi sits.
The crucial agricultural heartland for centuries.
And then there's that slender central section hugging the coast. It's notoriously a corridor for typhoons.
Yeah, putting cities like Da Nang and Hue in a similar, well, disaster-prone zone as Manila, actually. Same latitude issues.
Right. And finally, the south just explodes into the Mekong Delta, this vibrant, watery landscape, rice paddies everywhere, and the energy of Ho Chi Minh City.
The rice bowl of the country, really, and a major population center.
And we can't forget the coastline, 3,200 kilometers of it, dotted with wonders like Halong Bay and Phu Quoc.
Mm-hmm. And those enormous cave systems, too, like Sun Dune, just incredible geological features.
Even the climate shifts dramatically, north to south. It dictates what grows where: rice, coffee, everything's influenced.
You get those distinct four seasons in the north versus the year-round tropics further south. It's a huge factor.
Okay, so let's unpack this fascinating geography. How has it really set the stage for Vietnam's entire story?
Well, it's interesting how that elongated shape hasn't just dictated farming or weather. It's profoundly influenced Vietnam's history itself.
How so?
That sheer length sort of fostered a degree of regionalism. It presented ongoing challenges for centralized rule throughout different dynasties. It's harder to govern such a long, varied territory.
That makes sense. In this long history, Vietnam is one of the oldest continuous entities we know, right?
It is, but that continuity, as you said, wasn't exactly smooth sailing.
No kidding. Over 1,000 years of Chinese influence, starting way back in 111 BCE with the Han Dynasty invasion.
A huge period. It left a significant mark, definitely, on Vietnamese administration, culture.
But even then, there were constant resistance movements. Think of the Trung sisters back in 40 CE, or Ingo Quian's victory in 938 CE that finally ended direct Chinese rule for a time.
That resistance cultivated a really deep-seated aversion to foreign domination, a pattern you see repeating again and again.
And here's something amazing, even the Mongols, the seemingly unstoppable Mongol Empire, they were repelled 3 times by the Vietnamese in the 13th century.
3 times. It wasn't just military tactics, it speaks volumes about a national resilience forged over centuries of pushing back.
So that long period under China, followed by beating back forces like the Mongols, that must have really cemented a sense of identity.
Absolutely pivotal. It's solidified a strong sense of Vietnameseness, if you like, and a culture of perseverance, a theme that just echoes down the ages.
And that fierce spirit, that independence, it got tested again, didn't it? Centuries later with European colonialism.
The French. They began their conquest in 1858, eventually grouping Vietnam with Laos and Cambodia into French Indochina.
And yes, they did bring some economic development, built infrastructure like railways.
But, and this is a big but, it was fundamentally geared towards serving French economic interests, extracting resources, cash crops.
Right. And it came at the cost of Vietnamese sovereignty and involved serious economic exploitation, which predictably fueled nationalism.
It's that dual legacy of colonialism, isn't it? Infrastructure existed, but its main purpose was extraction and control. The loss of sovereignty was the key catalyst for the independence struggles to come.
And struggle they certainly did. After World War II, Ho Chi Minh declared independence.
But France wanted its colony back.
Which led straight into the First Indochina War, culminating in that huge Vietnamese victory at Dien Bien Phu in 1954.
A landmark moment. Absolutely stunning defeat for a colonial power.
But even that wasn't the end. The Geneva Accords then split the country north and south along the 17th parallel,
setting the stage, tragically, for the next conflict, the Vietnam War, or the American War, as the Vietnamese call it.
Fueled by Cold War politics, the U.S. got heavily involved, leading to, well, immense devastation.
Unbelievable destruction. But ultimately, North Vietnam prevailed in 1975.
Reunifying the country under communist rule, and Saigon was renamed Ho Chi Minh City. So, what does all this history mean for today's Vietnam? How does that long, often brutal past shape the present?
Well, that incredibly determined, generations-long struggle for independence. It undoubtedly instilled a powerful sense of national agency, self-reliance.
A kind of collective memory of overcoming immense challenges.
Exactly, and that created a strong foundation, I think, for the more recent economic transformations we've seen.
Which brings us to a really remarkable chapter. Vietnam's economic story since the 80s, the Doi Moi reforms in 1986.
Right, that shift towards what they call a socialist-oriented market economy.
It's a fascinating hybrid, isn't it? Opening up to foreign investment, market forces, but the state keeps control over key sectors.
It was a carefully managed transition, not just flinging the doors open, but integrating into the global economy while maintaining their political system.
And the results? Pretty striking. Consistently one of Asia's fastest growing economies, averaging, around 6% GDP growth for years.
Something like that, yeah. Really impressive sustained growth.
And interestingly, Vietnam's the only country with that kind of capitalist communist blend to have joined the World Trade Organization. That was back in 2007.
Joining the WTO was a major signal of commitment to playing by international trade rules, a significant step onto the global stage.
And they're definitely not resting on their laurels. There's this national master plan for 2021-2030.
Very ambitious goals in that plan.
Yeah, aiming to become a developed, high-income nation by 2050. And the strategy hinges on digital, green, and circular economies.
It reflects a really forward-thinking approach, tying future prosperity to tech advancement and environmental sustainability.
Plus, that commitment they made at COP26 net zero emissions by 2050, that's a huge undertaking for a rapidly developing economy.
It absolutely is. But it shows they understand the urgency of tackling climate change. It's not just an environmental issue, it's an economic one too.
Speaking of big shifts, urbanization, Vietnam's seen massive growth in its cities.
Huge growth. Since 2010, the urban population has been climbing by about 3% a year.
Reaching 38% urbanization by 2021, that's over 37 million people living in cities now?
Roughly, yeah. And the number of urban centers has shot up 888 currently, including the big players like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City.
And here's a key stat. Over 70% of the country's GDP now comes from these urban areas.
They are the economic engines, no question.
But that rapid growth comes with challenges, doesn't it? Big ones.
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic challenge in developing economies. You get strains on infrastructure, roads, power, water, housing shortages, transportation bottlenecks.
And ensuring everyone gets access to services, healthcare, education, making it equitable.
Exactly. And layered on top of all that are the increasing impacts of climate change and, as we've seen globally, the potential for epidemics. Cities concentrate those pressures.
And climate change pressure is particularly acute for Vietnam, given its geography. We talked about that earlier.
Precisely. Those low-lying deltas, the Red River, the Mekong, and that incredibly long coastline make it exceptionally vulnerable.
We're already seeing it, right? Rising temperatures, rainfall patterns getting weird, more intense typhoons.
And sea level rise. That's a huge long-term threat, especially for the deltas.
The economic cost is already massive. What was it? $10 billion in losses from extreme weather between 2011 and 2020.
Something like that. And nearly $11 billion in 2020 alone. That was 3.2% of their GDP in just 1 year from climate events.
Wow, that's staggering. On the upside, they seem to be improving their adaptation strategies. The Notre Dame Global Adaptation Initiative ranking improved.
They are making efforts, yes, investing in resilience. But the fundamental exposure, particularly to river and coastal flooding, remains a massive concern. You can't just engineer your way out of geography entirely.
No, you can't. Now, as the economy's grown, so have greenhouse gas emissions, inevitably.
Yeah, that's the typical trajectory. By 2019, Vietnam was the world's 16th largest emitter.
And the main source is energy production.
Overwhelmingly, about 65%, followed by agriculture, around 15%, then industry and waste.
But as we mentioned, they've made these significant climate commitments. Net zero by 2050 at COP26.
Then they updated their NDC, their nationally determined contribution at COP27, with even stronger emission reduction targets.
So the pledges are there, and there's policy backing it up, like the National Climate Change Strategy from 2022.
And crucially, the Power Development Plan 8, or PDP-8, approved in May 2023. That aims for a really high share of renewable energy generation by 2050.
So moving away from coal eventually.
That's the plan, a major pivot towards renewables like solar and wind, alongside potentially gas as a transition fuel. It's a critical shift, recognizing their growing emissions footprint and actively trying to change course.
Okay, so looking ahead, say towards 2025, what's the economic picture look like?
Generally pretty optimistic, actually. Forecasts point to strong growth.
Driven by what, mainly?
Continued foreign investment, strong exports through a major manufacturing hub now, and also healthy domestic demand. HSBC even projected Vietnam might have the highest GDP growth among major Southeast Asian economies.
Impressive. And it's not just growth for growth's sake, right? There's this emphasis on the dual transition.
Right. Digitalization and sustainability. Vietnam's seen as quite proactive here, embedding these into national strategies for the digital economy and green growth.
And the digital economy is expected to be huge, something like US $52 billion by 2025.
That's the projection. It's seen as key for productivity, innovation, and connecting to the global marketplace. Aligning economic development with these global trends is pretty strategic.
So if you're looking at investment priorities moving into 2025 and beyond, where's the focus?
Well, processing and manufacturing remain central. Electronics, telecommunications, those high-value areas.
Energy.
Definitely. Especially new and renewable energy. That's a huge growth area driven by rising electricity demand and those climate commitments.
What about getting goods moving, the logistics?
Yeah, that's another priority. Upgrading logistics, infrastructure, ports, roads, rail, aiming for double-digit growth there by 2025. There are challenges, infrastructure gaps, but it's also a big opportunity for investors.
And manufacturing. Value added is projected to hit nearly US $109 billion by 2025.
Vietnam's competitive advantages, relatively lower labor costs compared to some neighbors. Government incentives still make it really attractive as a manufacturing base, especially as companies look to diversify supply chains.
So it's this focus on higher value manufacturing, tech, renewables, and the logistics to support it all.
Exactly. It indicates a pretty clear industrial policy aimed at moving up the value chain, leveraging tech, and tackling energy needs sustainably.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've journeyed through Vietnam's unique S-shaped geography and how that shaped, well, almost everything.
Its history, its vulnerabilities, its strengths.
Right. We touched on that long, often difficult fight for independence, the incredible resilience shown throughout history.
Then the shift to that remarkable economic transformation with Toi Moi and the ambitious goals for the future.
But also acknowledging the very real challenges of rapid urbanization, the pressure that brings.
And the huge vulnerability to climate change, which loops right back to that geography.
And underpinning it all now seems to be this growing national focus on building a sustainable and digital future.
I think the key takeaway is that intricate dance between all these elements: history, geography, economic policy, global challenges like climate change. They're all interconnected.
Vietnam's story really shows how a nation can push for progress while grappling with some massive contemporary issues.
It certainly does. There's this dynamic interplay constantly at work.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Given that history of resilience and where they're headed economically, how might Vietnam's unique blend of, say, tradition and hypermodernity shape its role globally in the next few decades?
Especially navigating climate change and the digital revolution.
Yeah. What kind of innovative solutions might actually emerge from that specific context? It's a fascinating thought.
It really is something to ponder. And for anyone listening who wants to dig deeper, especially on the sustainable urban development side,
where should they look?
the UN Habitat Vietnam Country Report from 2023. That's a great resource. And for the latest economic updates and analysis, Vietnam Briefing is always very informative.
Excellent pointers. A lot to think about there.